Shane, welcome to Clear on Life. How are you doing?
Doing very well, Jaswal. Really honored and stoked to be here today.
Oh, so am I. Thank you so much for joining me. And what do you think is purpose of life?
I think having clear life purpose is one of the best drugs on the block. It is an intoxicating experience to know why you exist and what you're using your life in service to.
You have a purpose. It's just I can just see it on your face.
Yeah, I do have a purpose. There's a very clear reason for my existence right now. And, it's cool is that there's so much mystery too. It's not like I'm like, yeah, I figured every element of my purpose out. I am, 35 years old, which in the grand scheme of my life is I'm still a baby. I'm still so incredibly naive of who, when looking back in 20 years, I'll think back, when I did that podcast with Jaswal and I said I knew what my life purpose was, boy, was that kid completely unaware of the things that were coming down the pipeline in the next 20 years.
Well, just so imagine the future Shane is listening in 20 years from now. What would you say to him right now?
I would say, I hope you didn't stop dancing. I hope you kept your heart open. I hope that you continued to take measured risks, that you remained a student of the wondrous, and that you really showed up for your life. And that you didn't trade the one thing that is essential, which is your presence, for an illusion of some future fulfillment.
So in some sense, kind of, what you value in life right now, probably like furthering it rather than losing track of that.
Well, I mean, it's beautiful is that I'm in a place in my life where it's not so much about massive reinventions, but it's about deepening the roots. I already have some of the largest buckets of my world kind of full, or rather set up. Mm-hmm. I have the relationship of my dreams. I have an incredibly fulfilling marriage that has infinite capacity to evolve. There's really good communication. There's a shared sense of we can, through intention, create whatever we want in our lives. And that we get to be in that conversation together. So I'm like, cool. I've got the relationship that can be the vehicle for the rest of my life. And maybe that's not going to last the rest of my life. Maybe I die sooner than expected. Maybe she dies sooner than expected. And a whole monkey wrench is thrown into the works. But that's also part of, that's part of the package is the unexpected. And we don't know. And so we have to have some sense of peace around that. But right now, while I'm alive and she's alive, we're each other's partners. And there's actually incredible freedom in that. Because, anybody that's been in a long-term committed relationship probably knows what it's like to feel clear and feel that 100% commitment. And then also what it's like to not feel clear and to not feel 100% commitment. And it's two very different realities on either side of that equation. 100% is just tremendous freedom.
Is that where you are, you'd say?
Yeah, I am. And,
amazing.
It's funny because it's like I've gone in different waves throughout the relationship where it is 100%. It's the best thing ever. To, crap. Okay, well, I'm 99%, but that 1% when there's that little bit of doubt that creeps in and then starts kind of worming its way into your brain. And then you kind of like, yeah, well, crap, maybe I need to pay attention to that. And then just recently was reminded of, oh yeah, she's my woman. And boom, all of a sudden it just is like hanging out in neutral and just kind of or spinning wheels and you're like, what the hell's going on? And then that clarity allows you to just move into first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and boom, forward, and you're moving together. And it's a really good experience because it allows me to continue to know that it's okay to question things. It's okay to have doubts. And I also have a easier path back to that 100% devotion.
Wow. I mean, that's like an ideal dream connection relationship with someone, and you have it. And congratulations, you're gonna have a little baby girl.
Yeah,
soon.
we've got a kid on the way, which
Nice.
is, undoubtedly part of my naivete of the current moment of my life is that I'll be like, wow, I had no idea that my purpose was actually to be of service to this kid.
Right.
And intellectually, I get that right now. Okay, cool. I'm going to devote myself to the flourishing of my progeny, but it's an intellectual exercise. And what's so beautiful is that I was like, great, like, thank goodness I don't know what the next 2 decades will bring, because I would then be trying to conform the infinite universe, the trillions of stars and galaxies out in the ether, and say what I think is what's possible. And it's so much bigger than my little brain. And one of the secrets of my life has been to like let go of what I think I need and what I think I know,
Right.
in exchange for a much bigger world.
So let's go into that. What you think you need and what you need to let go. So do you have an example of, are you talking about ideas of how life should be and then giving into that, or like giving up on it, or what are you talking about?
It's always a weird thing, because usually what we think we need is coming from some root of fear. Most of us are operating with a pretty large kind of taproot that's still rooted in fear consciousness.
Right.
And so often we think, oh, well, I need $1 million. And if you actually dig into that and you start to inquire into a deeper, well, why do you really need $1 million? It often is actually rooted in fear. Or I want to be this person, or I want to accomplish this in my career. I want to have this kind of relationship. I want to travel to these places. Often, sometimes there's authentic desires there for sure. We're full of authentic desires, but then we're also rooted in, or we also have a lot of egoic and fear-based desires. And so I think that as we start to become intentional in our life and we can start making better prayers, better intentions, it often will come through in ways that were not at all what we were expecting. I remember this one time at Burning Man. It was, it's going on, I guess, about 11 years ago. And I was deep into Jed McKenna books, which, if you haven't read those, they're a really wild ride through awakening. And I was kind of inspired that year, and I took all of the journals, all of the early life memorabilia, 100 concert tickets, and all the journals I wrote in as a teenager, and anything that could kind of represent some of my biographical information,
Right.
of my identity, of my past. And I bundled it all together, and I wrapped it in a snake skin from one of my snakes that had shed its skin. And I took it to the temple, and I plopped it down, and I wrote in big black Sharpie, I declare spiritual warfare on my false self.
Dang. That's quite an intention.
And, partied my ass off. It was an incredible burn. It was like when I discovered that I was a dancer, that, watching the sunrise and dancing all night lit something up inside of me. And it was this ecstatic burn. And then I got back and my entire life fell apart. Just a nuclear bomb.
What happened?
I lost all of my income, devastating breakup. The first breakup of my life where it felt like I got like my heart carved out with a dagger, thrown in the gutter, and then pissed on.
I've been there. Ooh, feel you, man.
And, and it really led to a bit of about a year and a half of a dark night of the soul, of really going into deeper and deeper shadow.
And you were 25 about?
Yeah, about 25.
Okay.
And there's no way that I would have made that intention had I known the disaster that would follow.
But that means that you made that intention and the disaster followed because of it. Is that?
Well, you can't always, you can't explain any of this stuff. You can't prove that that making the declaration of I declare spiritual warfare on my false self, led to a collapsing of the systems and structures in my life that were no longer serving me and that were ready to die. But I know that they were connected. You know, there's not a part of me that wonders, oh, I made that intention and then this happened. And, you know, so part of that is also, again, like trusting that we are very capable of influencing our reality, that consciousness creates reality, which is a whole other rabbit hole that we can go down.
Yeah.
But you know, and it's these things where we kind of hear that and maybe we think that's true. But we also are still pretty steeped in a materialistic paradigm where the universe actually is what's the real thing. And my brain's just producing consciousness. And, you know, and so it's kind of this like, I kind of believe that stuff, but really, I don't know. And I think that's part of the journey of purpose also that's been for me at least is really realizing that no, this is real. There are operating principles of how consciousness influences reality. And so that process, I would never have wished for it. I didn't want to go through that hardship. And yet it is the absolutely best thing that could have happened. How it set me up for then going through the hero's journey and the death and rebirth and the rediscovery of hidden assumptions that I was using to kind of guide my life. It all burned to the ground. And in that blank slate, a different thing was able to emerge, which is now I recognize as the seeds of my current life.
So let's rewind for a second because so going back to Burning Man, where you had this intentional thing that you burned, where you just went to the temple and it was burned down on the burn night, right? What led to that? Because I'm curious how you got to that point where was this just one little idea in this guy, hey, I think I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to just go do this. Or what was it? Was it a culmination of things or was it a person?
Yeah, it was the culmination of my entire life.
Up till then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, and I say that jokingly, but it's also very true.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that it's the result of, you know, studying consciousness from a very young age of having an intuition that there's something deeper going on than what the mainstream status quo agreement is.
Because I'm interested in two things there. One is the actual having intentions and having an intentional life and going through a process that you went through. That can be useful for a lot of people. But I'm also interested in the meta is how does someone who, let's say, doesn't have this insight at some point, you know, how do they approach this if they hear this? You know, maybe they haven't read all the books and they haven't had time or whatever the reason is. How do you light that spark from within?
Yeah, well, that's not necessarily everybody's spark, you know, and that's one of the beauties and one of the things that I'm clearer on than ever is that we all have very different paths. You know, if you feel a yearning in your chest that there is something deeper, that there is something beyond the superficial layer of life, that there is a greater mystery happening and that it is possible to know the underbelly of that mystery. If you don't already have that, then celebrate that, you know, enjoy it. It's not like it's a ideal thing to have. It can be a maddening quest for truth. And often it remains unfulfilled. You know, just because you seek does not mean you will find. And there are people that aren't driven by that seeking and that their path is going to look differently.
Right.
And, you know, that's the thing. That's the really pain in the ass around purpose and finding the deep sense of what is my essence? What is it that actually brings all of my being to the table so that I can live a fully fulfilled life in all dimensions? It's going to be very different for every person. There's maybe common themes. Maybe there's some things you can recycle, some lessons you can recycle from other people, but it's something that we have to do on our own.
There's this inquiry in there that you asked these questions. What is my essence? What's my life about? And I think that's something probably common to a lot of people who are potentially listening to this. And I, for example, have this, I'm upon something, I don't know what it is. It's just, it's as you described it, it's just ephemeral. It's just below the surface, just right there. Can't point to it, can't get a handle on it, and just bugs me to no end, and I'm there and I don't even know like exactly what to do at this point with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's maddening. I mean, like think about how freer you would be without that.
Oh my God.
You could just like, cool, I'm going to just go about life and actually be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you would be happy too.
Yeah. That was me like about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Just totally go with the flow, just enjoying it. And then suddenly just, something felt like it was missing, and lack of sleep and just lots of thoughts and ideas and just circling around this vast unknown, which is still, it's become clearer a little bit, but it's just been asking a lot of questions, and it's still not very clear. So I just love hearing stories. I love hearing your story in particular here about how you just, there's this sharpness to the set of actions you took at Burning Man that year.
Yeah. And I mean, the wild thing for me is that I spent my 20s, better part of my 20s, really pursuing, a path less traveled. I kind of burned my career to the ground. I was kind of like, all right, well, I don't know. Through a combination of both professional insecurity of feeling like, I don't know, I don't think I'm just that good at work. There's these other domains that I feel really good at, and I'm going to go into those.
Right.
And so spent a lot of my 20s kind of exploring a lot of the transformational underbelly of the Bay Area and finding these things in these communities and these programs that really spoke to my constant impulse for expansion, for transformation, for connection, for deeper relationship. And I spent a lot of my time in those communities, and it was kind of cool, but it was also confusing because I was like, I really love this stuff. And how the fuck is this going to translate into paying my rent?
Right.
And, sitting here now, 11, 12 years later, it's, I had no idea what was going to happen in the last decade. 8 years ago, got kind of looped through serendipity into starting a technology company. And now, I'm the chief culture officer of a hyper growth startup where we just tripled our headcount in the last year. We went from 70 employees to 200 right now. We're, having this really cool mission, but there's no way that if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be a founder of a tech company now, I would have been like, you're insane. You're totally smoking DMT or something.
Right.
And, and so it's, again, that's what I mean about when we start to pray, we start to ask for our intention, for our purpose to be revealed. You better be ready to be surprised. You better be willing to let go of the way you think it was going to be and actually allow what is happening.
Prayer and intention, are they the same thing for you? Or is there a distinction between them?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, prayer is so loaded. It's such a loaded word.
Yeah.
And people are like, all I wanted was, a fulfilling career. Now, Jesus is in the middle of this. And because, I'm like, oh yeah, right. Like people have all these religious connotations and maybe it's positive, maybe it's negative. I didn't grow up religious. And so it doesn't have that baggage for me. But when I say prayer, I think that it really is talking about getting in connection to not just intention, because intention is a little different. Intention is, I'm going to have a great day. And I really think of prayer as more of, please help me have a great day. Prayer is an asking for assistance. And whether you relate that to God or a universe that is listening, there's all kinds of interesting distinctions. And that's another thing that it has to be our own individual journey. But I will say that learning how to ask for help is an essential path of not having to carry your entire life on your own shoulders.
Yeah, and that's been a big lesson for me, and it took a while, because it was always like when I heard about Hero's Journey, and you hear about these success stories in the Bay, and it's just like this one person just did it on their own and just got there and self-made, and you don't hear about the hundreds of people that probably assisted that person one way or another, whether they knew them or not, and kind people and kindness and whatever in the universe came together.
Right. Not to mention all of the socioeconomic privileges that person might have,
Exactly.
and the ways that, being a white male has put me into the front of the classroom so that it's actually easier to suddenly find myself as a co-founder of a tech company. All those things are a part of it. And yet you can't it's dangerous to reduce the whole thing to a single ingredient.
Right.
And I think people falter there too, of like, oh, well, it's your white privilege that allowed those things. And yeah, probably to a good extent. And, I'm convinced it's more complex.
Oh, me
just
too.
That.
Yeah. I mean, just talking with you right now and knowing you for a while, it's definitely not just white privilege, but let's acknowledge that that's there, and it's great to acknowledge that, because then use it to the advantage you can. Totally. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up as a white minority in northern New Mexico. And so I grew up around a predominantly Chicano and Native American population. And so it was like, I spent my youth running from getting beaten up because I was white. It's like, it wasn't actually till I moved to the Bay Area that the white privilege started to kick in a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not like, terrified out of my mind and getting verbally assaulted on a regular basis. Not that that's all it was. There was a lot of harmony in the tricultural dynamic of northern New Mexico. But it's an interesting experience, because it has given me more of a sense of what it feels like to not belong.
Right. And it's, what's interesting is that takes me to this whole idea of, your basic needs. Need for safety, not getting beat up when you walk out the door. When you don't have to think about those things, then you can then potentially be in a place to create and then exercise that creativity.
Absolutely. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and self-actualization is preceded by some very important things like belonging and esteem. It's a part of my purpose to actually speak to what my purpose is to create high-performing organizations by helping people become their best selves. And so to break down what that means a little bit, is that companies have a really unique opportunity to create a deeper sense of belonging, to provide opportunities to cultivate esteem. That instead of just providing the bottom two rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs so that you have physical safety and a paycheck, you can actually create the conditions where your company becomes a valid pathway for self-actualization for every single person inside of it. And what happens to the creativity of your company, of your organization, when you're able to do that is phenomenal. All of a sudden, the bandwidth that is occupied by covering your ass can be utilized and redirected towards creativity and execution and innovation.
Wow. So is this idea, is this something that you were inspired to put into the company because of your life, or how did this come to be?
Yeah, so it's absolutely been deeply drawn upon from my own journey. And also from my co-founder's journey, David Hassel. And what's cool is that it has also been an iteration. It's always been there. And yet, over the last 8 years, we've been slowly chipping away and refining it and tweaking it, mutating the purpose. It's always been there, but it's now clearer than it's ever been.
Okay.
And why purpose is so powerful is that it acts as a true north. It acts as the magnet to the iron filings and you have that ideal, you have that vision, and it starts to rearrange your life. It starts having you make different decisions. You start turning left instead of turning right based on the ideal that you are aspiring towards. And yeah, if I hadn't taken that decade to explore my own personal development, to explore relationships and community, and how do you create intimacy in a room? How do you get people to move into high levels of vulnerability and high levels of trust in a matter of 30 to 60 minutes? If I hadn't gone through a lot of communication training and gone through my coaching training and learning NLP and learning some of these models of consciousness, I would not have done the same things I did do in building this company. And so it's really, it just endlessly delights me and blows my mind that all the things I did that I thought were somewhat irresponsible from a career financial perspective are indeed the very things that have allowed me to create a distinctly different kind of company culture. And, some of the results we've gotten are, in 8 years, we've had 5 people voluntarily leave. Only 2 of those were for other jobs, which for the industry is insanely low. We just won number 3 best place to work on Glassdoor for companies under 1,000 employees. And so we're winning all these awards. We were just on Inc. Best Places to Work award as well. And people come into the company and they are amazed because it's unlike anything they've ever experienced before. And all it is me bringing these, not just me, but me helping shepherd and encourage these interpersonal technologies, these ways of communicating, these ways of relating, of us taking a stand of saying, yes, we want you to come in and be a part of the fulfillment of the vision of this company. But we also want this company to be a part of the fulfillment of your purpose. And most people don't know their purpose. And so then you start setting it up to help people start asking these questions, start digging a little deeper into, well, what do they really want? Why are they here? What is the silent voice inside of their heart saying to them?
Is this like a structured way of... So it sounds like there's a lot of inquiry that happens once people are part of 15.5. And through this, maybe there's some clarity over time. And so is this a structured process that you take people through?
Yes and no. There's a lot of structured process, and there's also giving permission. There's a context that part of why we are at this company is to be and become our best selves. And that means different things for different people. But part of that is a lot of introspection, reflection, prospection, thinking about the past, thinking about the present, thinking about the future. And so it's things like strengths discovery, really understanding what are your actual strengths, and then how can you invest in them and turn them into superpowers, into your zone of genius. There's personal goal setting. So once a year at our annual company retreat, we take a couple of hours to help lead people through a process of getting clear of what their ideal life is. What do they really want out of life? And documenting that, creating goals, creating an inspiring vision that can pull them into the future. And there's ongoing opportunities, we'll outsource some of this stuff. We buy people, their access to, landmark education, for instance. We'll pay for somebody to go to the forum, though, and that's very not a mandatory thing. It's just hey, if you want to do that, this has been a big piece of our path that's been very helpful. And here's an opportunity. This year we decided to buy everybody's first ticket to Burning Man.
Oh, nice.
Because, me and my co-founder were like, all right, cool. We're in the business of helping create transformation for our employees. What is one of the most transformational experiences that we've ever been to? Is fucking Burning Man. Let's buy tickets for them. And, and it's hilarious because we did this program and then, the press caught wind of it. And all of a sudden, I have this feature length interview in Inc. and Bloomberg and Business Times. And we got shitloads of press around it. And it's a fine line to walk of tech companies sends their people to Burning Man, and everyone's trying to get the dirt on on it.
Yeah.
And I think I did a pretty good job of navigating that fine line. But it is a perfect example of when we're willing to be different, when we're willing to stray from the typical course, we stand out. And that's a very good thing. That is how we can break away from all the noise and get some signal through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember seeing that article, and it was like, what? This is such a great idea. And so, speaking of Landmark, I'm about to do the advanced course.
Excellent.
Next week.
Yeah.
Did the forum about a month ago, and granted, it's like the culture feels like the aesthetics feel like stuck in the late 90s, but and the salesiness. But other than that, man, that thing is
my advice
powerful.
is take the best, leave the rest.
Exactly.
It's like you get in, get out.
Yeah.
And I think people who be like, oh well, I don't want to be exposed to any of the like hard sale of it, miss out on the gems that you can get from something
fully
like
agree. It took me about a day and a half to get over myself and actually say, you know what about if I just go in there and get what I want to get?
Yeah, I walked out of my first introduction to it. I was like, screw this crap. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And Landmark was a huge piece of my path. It actually was the precondition for me, or it set me up to have the relationship that I have now.
Okay, so let me take you back just so that I can tie some of these things together. Going back to your personal journey for a bit, and you talked about relationships, and we were talking about before we started recording about responsibilities and all of that. I want to get there too, but before that, relationships. What else would you say complete that stack for you, where you feel like okay, I'm in a place where it feels good?
Yeah, sure. So clarity of purpose around career and finance, which are really big pieces to get, a sense of directional rightness with, that my career is moving in the right direction. Like I have the best job in the world.
Right.
I get to create incredible cultures.
And you didn't just get there by saying one day at Burning Man, like, I'm going to get there. This was a discovery process.
Yeah, this is a long, circuitous, winding, non-linear path. I've done so many random ass jobs. I've tried a lot of different hats on for a year at a time. And
even at 15.5, or was it?
To some extent at 15.5. Yeah, with 15.5, I was VP of customer success for most of my time.
Got it.
And it's only in the last 18 months that it was like, oh, click chief culture officer. I get to run our internal culture full time and get to go out and evangelize and talk about culture and to talk about best self-management, which is managing people so that they can become better versions of themselves. And once I made that transition, it was like, that is what alignment feels like.
Hit the spot.
It's like click, click, click. And it's really interesting that, there's other things. I basically leveraged the gene keys, which we've talked a little bit about before, and my own hologenetic profile in order to reinvent my role inside of the company. Because in your profile, you start to see things like your vocation and your life's work, and like line 2, like I'm a line 2 in my vocation, which, for people who don't know, the gene keys is all going to be gobbledygook. But you go in and deeply contemplate that, and it was like, oh, wow, okay, so I'm a 50th gene key in my vocation, and line 2, which is the gift is equilibrium and harmony, and line 2 is marketing. And so it's like, I need to go and basically promote organizational harmony. That is my vocation in life. And I'm like, fuck yeah, it is. Yeah. That's always been what I've been doing. And yet getting the clarity around that really actually has helped me fully step into it and own it and have the clarity to continue developing this path.
How were you and how was life before you had that clarity?
Yeah, well, when we're doing things that aren't in alignment with our purpose, it's draining. And now it's there's a lot of interesting distinctions here, because we also don't want to be operating from a fixed mindset which, I don't know if you know Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindsets.
A little bit.
But, a fixed mindset is that I'm as smart as I'll ever be, or I'm as good at math as I'll ever be. And so therefore I should never try to get better at math. And a growth mindset is, intelligence and skills and abilities are variable traits, and the amount of effort you put into it determines what you're going to get. And so I'm not that great at math, but if I go take some math classes and get some tutors and put in effort, I will get better. And then from there I can get better and it can get better and get better. And so we don't want to use a little bit of what I'm going to say as an excuse to justify our fixed mindset.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. But I think the reason I asked this was because it might help people get a map of where they are based on what they're hearing, another report of someone who's been there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, a really bad use of my time is handling the operational details of running customer success and trying to create spreadsheets to predict our annualized churn. And really looking at, what is the right formula for the number of customers and which segments and what the ARR of those customers are and what level of CSM needs to be dedicated to each segment. And, I was doing that stuff and I was doing it passively, but it was usually riddled with some of my insecurity and not feeling like, fuck yeah, I love this. We talk about zone of excellence and zone of genius, and that in your zone of excellence, you can do something pretty well and you might even build a career out of it, but it doesn't actually give you energy. You do it and it's just this slow degradation of your optimism and your inspiration and your energy. Zone of genius is you do it and it actually gives you energy. It might be tough as shit, but you end the day feeling well used.
Right.
And that is a journey to discover your zone of genius. And so for me, it's like when I, for all of the things that I've done in my weird ass random career that I've had, I can look of, those were the moments when I was in my zone of genius, and those were the moments when I was fighting against the way that I'm wired.
Right. Yeah, the way you're wired. Yeah, that's a good concept to have. A lot of people don't think of that, because it's almost, I think there's a very self-defeating way of looking at life sometimes, and I've been a victim of that in the past, where I'm not good, I'm not worthy, I'll have to work X, Y, and Z things and just go through this and suffer to make myself my existence be like somehow worthy happening.
Yeah. And I think that's how most of us are conditioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's generally the consensus. And we're also very trained to focus on our weakness. Mm-hmm. Where we as children, we come home with a report card and we got 4 A's and we got 1 D.
Right.
Where's the conversation going to go?
Oh, yeah.
The A's are going to be glanced over and all attention is going to be paid to the D. And how do you fix the D?
Right.
Well, you know what? I suck at math and I tortured myself in high school around that. And I don't use math in my fucking job ever. And it's the greatest fucking thing. It is so goddamn good that I get to do what I am really good at and get incredible results and do things that nobody else can do as good as me. And I get to know that and trust that and leverage that.
And that feeds you too.
And it lights me up again and again. I get to fall. I'm more in love with building this company than I was 8 years ago when we first started it.
So going there for a second, when you first started, and it sounded like, it's not like you had planned all of this, in a grand way. You started this. What's the scene? Can you paint the picture a little bit? Like, where were you in life, and then this suddenly comes along?
Yeah, sure. So after 5 years of going through every transformational course you can get your hands on in the Bay Area.
This is between Burning Man.
This is, so I mean, just like real. So grew up in New Mexico, moved to New York when I was 20, fell in love with an heiress, moved in with her in Manhattan, never having been to New York before, left my like $500 shit Toyota Corolla with like 230,000 miles on it to my brother, moved to Manhattan, had a crazy 2 years of rapid expansion into the world in that journey. I worked at Air America Radio with Bobby Kennedy Jr. All this wild stuff happened in those 2 years. Moved to the Bay Area, and we broke up. Actually, me and my partner broke up because I read The Ethical Slut, and she was like, "Nope, over." And I moved to the Bay Area. I get a job in clean tech private equity. Talk about just horrible alignment of my strengths. So I was doing quantitative analysis on all these clean tech funds.
Why were they hired? Were you like...
I somehow hustled my way into that job.
Oh,
I have no idea why they hired me.
Is that typically for data scientists or something?
No, I mean, I was an associate, so I was doing a bunch of grunt work for financial analysis.
I see.
It was a broker-dealer fund, and so pairing investors with clean tech funds. This was, '07, right before the crash. And, and simultaneously, I was like, just moved to the Bay, discovered One Taste. And and so about a year after I moved to the Bay, I got fired from the clean tech job. Thank goodness. They should have fired me like
what was their reason?
Ago. I just wasn't doing good. It was like they liked me, but I just wasn't performing. I would like, it was a lot of heavy quant analysis in Excel. And I would go to lunch being like, oh, I hate this so much. I would eat 2 specialties cookies, which are like a 1/4 pound cookie each.
Oh my God.
I'd go back upstairs and then just feel that 100-pound eyelid.
Oh yeah.
And just feel so terrified of like, oh no, I hate this so much. Try to go like sneak a nap on the couch in the conference room, terrified of them finding me. It just wasn't
oh my God.
I just was not in my zone of genius.
So super awesome thing. You got fired there.
So in a week, I got fired. I finished my bachelor's degree because I basically dropped out of college to move to New York, and then went to Burning Man and moved into One Taste all in a week.
Wait, One Taste New York or San Francisco?
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yeah, and this is like the old school warehouse when there was 50 of us in a single room living in a warehouse in Soma. And, it was a very different exploration. And it's funny because that was actually where I started to discover more of what I would realize was more zone of genius. And no, not oming, but connection.
For those of you who don't know oming.
Yeah. So One Taste was this wild, freaky community in the Bay Area. In the last decade, it kind of it grew a lot. Yeah. And riddled with controversy, kind of cult of personality, and some really interesting ideas behind it. And it was all basically centered around, can we create human development and evolution through orgasm? Through expanded massive orgasm, can you create an experience of people growing and becoming a different version of themselves? And a lot of it was based around a lot of communication practices and connection exercises. And it was kind of in the heyday of the transformational intentional communities of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
It was like right when Authentic World was really at its peak, which was kind of a sister community, a little less focused on sexuality, a little more focused on relationships. And we were hosting all these events and conferences and workshops in the space, living in a warehouse with 50 other people with no walls, exploring orgasm. Not many people have experienced that.
Right. Yeah.
And that's part of what I mean of like, I was like, holy shit, this is a way more interesting path than quantitative analysis on investment funds.
Totally.
And how the fuck am I going to pay rent? And so, so there's about a 4-year period where I was deep in that kind of a world. And so it was workshops and conferences pretty much every weekend, at least 2 weekends every month. I was in some kind of transformational workshop. That led into actually meeting one of my mentors, and who really trained me as a coach. Because what do you do after you do 4 years of transformational work? You become a coach, like everyone else in the Bay Area. And it was, coaching was really actually one of the first areas of my life, the first kind of career that I tried on that, and it's so funny because I think back of like the amount of anxiety I had around like career and purpose when I was 24.
Right.
And it's kind of like, chill the fuck out and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Like, trust that journey.
Yeah.
If I could give advice to myself, is like, trust the process.
Yeah.
It's all going to work out, but trust what you're doing. You don't see how it's going to lead to everything, but it is going to. Like, take the path less traveled. I would just encourage my younger self.
Have some faith in the process.
Yeah, have some faith in the process.
Yeah.
And so I discovered coaching, I discovered neurolinguistic programming, and I fell in love with it because it was finally this way of synthesizing all the things that I had done and then actually being in service to other people, helping create breakthrough and shifts for others. And it was like, click, boom, love it. And so I did that for quite a few years and, was in the grind of building my own solo practice and building a decent word of mouth clientele and moving into business coaching startups, starting to, I facilitated a lot of founder divorces. I started like understanding what are the cracks in culture. Why do companies fail? Not just from a product market fit, but because of relational failure. But most business failure, I learned, is relational failure. People failure.
And this was happening around 2010, 2011?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. Between 2008 and 2012 was when I was in the full swing of my coaching section of my life.
Okay.
And so that was really fascinating because I got to, part of becoming a coach is receiving a shitload of coaching. For anyone that's gone down that path, they know what I mean.
Right.
And so it was cool because I got to work on a lot of my own stuff. I got to get clear on my own vision for my life. I got to receive a ton of coaching around my own blocks, my own kind of belief systems that could use upgrading. And so I did a lot of that inner work, a lot of the shadow work in that period as well.
And this was setting up the context for, I assume, the startup that happened around what year was that?
2012.
2012.
I met my co-founder and we hit it off. I turned him on to cold showers and a body weight training app called You Are Your Own Gym by this guy, Mark Lauren. That's phenomenal body weight training. He used to train the special ops and body weight strength training. And I was super into that and was digging cold showers, and it all kind of converged. And I told him about this and he loved it. And we started connecting a little bit more. He told me what he was up to. And I was asking for his help I was running a webinar called Supercharged of how for basically helping entrepreneurs understand that energy management, not time management, is the key to performance. And then I'm asking him, what does he need help with? He's like, well, I just literally yesterday launched this company, 15.5, and all these people are signing up and I need somebody to coach them. And he's like, do you know anybody that could help? And it was really, it was a funny moment because I swear I saw two diverging paths open up before me.
Right there as he asked you
right
that
there
question.
As he asked that question. And I knew, fuck, that sounds like me. I kind of want to do that.
Yeah.
But then it was like, don't be presumptuous.
Ooh.
Don't like be rude and self-serving or whatever it was. I could say, thanks, I'll think about it. I'll think of if I know anybody and kind of do the polite thing.
Right.
Or say, well, you know what? That sounds like me. Let's talk.
Yeah. Wait, by this point in time, had you already taken Landmark?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did that come into play there by any chance, or
Was it present in that moment? Maybe not.
maybe not?
Well, what's funny is that my co-founder had also done Landmark about the same time that I had, which was 2008.
Got it.
And so maybe not. I don't know. Not
Okay.
in my mind, it's not a central part of that narrative.
But you had a chance. So going back to your story, so you saw these two possibilities, and you took this one where you're like very
Yeah, it was
present.
like going to be bold,
Yeah.
basically. Bold and
Being bold.
presumptuous.
Yeah. And that is something that I personally feel we could all use a little more of. A lot of times we're a little too nice and a little too just mellow sometimes, especially when it comes to our careers or, doing things in our life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, right. And that was the big lesson there, is that like, if I hadn't asked for what I wanted, if I hadn't been bold and presumptuous, my life would look very different. And who knows, maybe, I'm sure that would have been another beautiful life. But building this company over the last 8 years has been one of the single greatest blessings of my life. It has called me so much deeper into my purpose, into the clarity of purpose,
Yeah.
into giving me the opportunity to take on a large responsibility and be granted trust to do
Yeah.
it, and then to bring everything, all the tools that I've collected along the weird ass paths that I've traveled, and bring them to the table and apply them in building a different kind of a company, which is now informing the model that we have built to go out and help other people build a different kind of company, to create transformative cultures. It blows my mind. I
all of this-
count my lucky stars every day around this.
Yeah. And just going back to that, I mean, my mind's blown because of this pivotal moment that you just described, where you were bold and presumptuous. I just want to go back to that because I think maybe we can explore that for a second. Just, what are the ways you see people can be encouraged to do that? Do you encourage that in your company right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I mean, part of it is getting deliberate about who do we want to be. And one of my favorite exercises that a leader, I still coach the random CEO here and there, and coach. Like, what's interesting is all the training that I did as a coach permeates everything I do. It surprised me, which it shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but one of the best ways that you can prepare to be an executive is to be an executive coach. One of the best ways to be a manager is to learn coaching. And it's so funny because even 10 years ago, coaching was still fairly fringe.
Right.
It wasn't as nearly as mainstream as it is now.
Right.
And now it's become heavily normalized.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because, we're building all these trainings of how to manage like a coach. How to train your managers to think like coaches instead of just taskmasters, but how do you ask questions to elicit people's own innovation and own resourcefulness?
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite techniques or exercises to run with people is what I call core desired feeling states. And it's a really cool place to begin when you're working with somebody who maybe you think that they would benefit from more confidence. Or from more boldness, or you've just done Landmark and you're like, holy shit, I actually can live in possibility, and I don't have to put my past into my future, and I can actually declare who I am.
Right. Yeah, there's this boldness aspect. I just love it because I know people who are sometimes just maybe not bold, and it might be because they're just not in that state right then and there. What I've seen is that you look at a person and you think, oh, okay, they're not bold, but then it just comes out. You never know. And a lot of people have a lot of potential. So I totally believe that there's that potential to be bold is in everyone.
Yeah.
But perhaps there's this inertia of just being kind of in the background and just kind of like, just going with someone else's flow, playing someone else's game, and people just get used to it. So it just requires this whip of like,
absolutely. And it's interesting
like a cold
because sometimes you don't even know that's coming.
For yourself.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that is going to elicit and inspire our boldness, we might have to respond to a situation, and that is what awakens our boldness. Like I'm convinced who I am now, I wouldn't be the same if I hadn't been tasked with building this company for the last 8 years. It was a unique situation that somebody believed in me and saw my potential and then put a lot of responsibility on my plate. And I was able to take it and run with it. But it wasn't on my list of things to do to start a company. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, and bless their hearts, who are like very determined and very clear they want to start their own company.
Right.
That wasn't me. And yet it's been one of the most challenging and the most incredible things that I've ever done and will continue to do. Every day it's another level to have to step up to.
So, go ahead.
Well, just that starting to get clear that, okay, maybe I do want to be more bold. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh yeah, I've had opportunities pass me that I could have reached out and snatched, but I didn't because of timidity, because of, what some people might think I'm a presumptuous asshole.
And while this is going on, the opportunity just whooshed by.
And so one of my favorite things to do is just have people start to name, how do you want to feel? What ways of being do you want to cultivate more in your life? And it's actually an exercise I stole from Brendan Burchard, which is, and it's a really powerful thing. And you basically brainstorm a bunch of different ways of being and adjectives and feeling states that you want more of in your life. And you boil it all down to 3 so that you then have your 3 core desired feeling states. And you write that shit on a wall and you think about it, you contemplate it, and it becomes this true north, because we have all these strategies of, we typically do the things in our life in order to feel a certain way. Even wanting to have purpose in our life is to lead to a feeling state.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so what's so cool is you can bypass a lot of that and start practicing the feeling now. And that's a whole, kind of transformational paradigm, instead of, if you go out and you do the thing, then you can have the thing and then you can feel the thing. But you can flip the script. Instead of have, do, be, you actually go into be, do, have. So you start to shift your internal state immediately. And then you start doing things, and then you start having things.
So the B part, the feeling part, the desired feeling states. Are you saying that with the right techniques, you could just get into any state regardless of the do and the have? Pretty
much. And it's a process. It almost acts as more of a compass. About 11 or 12 years ago, I chose 3 words. I did this process in a workshop. And what I came up with was like the qualities of being, the ways of being I want to cultivate more in my life. I reduced down to 3 words: awake, competent, and loving. Because when I'm awake, and awake means so many things to me. Awake is spiritually awake. Awake is physically awake, energetically awake, emotionally awake. Competent is, I've struggled with incompetence. I've struggled with that sitting in front of the spreadsheet at 2:00 in the afternoon as my eyes are closing because I hate this shit and I don't feel good at it. And competence was really about, I want to feel my competence. I want to do things that I feel like I can do well. And then loving, which is living life from an open heart, seeing through the eye of my heart.
And so as you distill down to these 3, you're looking at them and you're these words and you're contemplating, you're imagining how it feels to be in that state, or are you actually feeling it?
Either or.
Okay.
You know, you start wherever you can. But what's so interesting is, I mean, I wrote those, I think I said 11 years ago, I think it was about that. They still remain to be the three anchors that I use. I haven't changed them. I've tried updating and getting new words, and I'm like, no, those are good, man. Because there's infinite levels of awakeness. There's infinite levels of competence. There's infinite levels of loving.
Right.
And they never get old. I don't get tired of feeling awake, competent, loving. It's still so damn good.
Yeah.
And so, but what's cool is that my center of gravity is way more in those three states than it was 11 years ago. And what it does is it increases the contrast, because all of a sudden you actually know how you want to feel. And so when I'm not feeling competent, I know, and I can just be like, oh, right. All right. I'm feeling incompetent right now. I want to feel competent. And that instantly helps me actually start shifting my direction towards what will have me feel competent. Okay, great. Well, then get back on the horse. Try again. Don't give up. Cultivate a little more grit. Loving. Right. I'm pissed at my brother for being an asshole to me and me feeling like he's an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's not
I
being
don't
an
know him,
asshole.
but-
Maybe, you know, I could do a little MVC on that.
Yeah.
When you did this, it made me feel, and so, you know, you know, it helps me better locate the places where I'm not feeling loving. And it doesn't mean I have to immediately shift into loving, but it just brings greater awareness of what isn't loving in my life.
Right.
And then over time, it's like water over a rock. It just slowly erodes.
Yeah.
And so after 11 years of this, it's like, yeah, like I feel so incredibly blessed to be in a state of loving most of the time in my life. And that makes all the difference.
There's also this power of compounding interest, I see. You know, it's been 11 years. You know, it's not like you had to do a crazy amount of things on day one, but over time, this is accrued, and
Absolutely.
here you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of the journey of discovering my purpose has been that there's been peak moments that have really shed light on it, but it's been an accumulative process. It has been approaching it from a lot of different angles have all led to a place where feeling like, yeah, this is the light. I feel so incredibly happy with the life that I'm living. And it's something that is interesting. I'm doing, I just signed up for this course called Life Book, and it's offered through Mind Valley.
Okay.
And it's a cool program,
Yeah.
and it starts in a couple of weeks. And one of the things that they really have you go through is looking at 12 dimensions of life. So, you know, career, finance, emotions, relationships, like life vision, physical health, spirituality, yada, 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 yada. And you'll go through and run a rate yourself. And they talk about how few people on the planet actually are successful in all these dimensions. You know, a lot of people maybe make a lot of money, but their relationships are horrible, or their relationships are great, but their health is failing, or all the, you know, different things. And it was kind of this interesting experience because I'm like, holy shit, I'm high marks in all of them. And it was actually interesting. It was doing that I got the lowest. I gave myself the lowest marks actually for my marriage, which was really like kind of an uncomfortable thing because it was like shit. Because I was in the middle of kind of a little weird period of having a little crunchiness and tightness in my marriage, and that 99% commitment I was talking about earlier. And it was actually in seeing that and realizing what is usually one of the strongest elements of my life, which is my relationship, I was feeling the least fulfilled. And it was that awareness that helped me then shift and realize, wait, well, that's freaking silly because I want an extraordinary relationship. And this is the woman to have an extraordinary relationship with. Like, I already have my woman. It's actually just me sitting, holding back a little bit. And then, boom, shifted that. And then, boom.
I see. That was that moment.
Totally.
Yeah.
It just, whoa.
Was that instantaneous?
Yeah,
Like,
it was.
okay.
Yeah. It was a decision. It was a choice that I made to go back into 100%.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I won't ever slip out of that, but you know, it's what's so great is that I've learned this lesson a couple of times, and I feel like the time to remembering that is shorter and shorter.
With practice.
With practice. Yeah. And that's why I think taking an integral, integrative, multifaceted approach to our life and to our purpose is the jam. Because we aren't going to just end up externally fulfilled and we fulfilled our purpose and we saved the world. But whoa, I'm not happy. I did everything, I accomplished everything I thought I wanted. And yet I still have that ache in my heart, that thirst. Yeah. Or we can, you know, pursue just an internal path and, you know, be deeply fulfilled and deeply happy, but also not have the relationship that we want. Or we always kind of screw up our relationships and we sabotage them. Or, and, you know, we're still in, you know, kind of subsistence around our finances. And, you know, I mean, if you're going to do one or the other, I mean, I guess, you know, be happy and broke rather than like, you know, rich and unhappy.
Yeah. Miserable and locked in your own little palace.
But, you know, we can have it all. We can be fulfilled and have our finances together and have a great sex life and raise an amazing family and, you know, participate in the regeneration of the world. We can actually do this. And part of it is loosening up our imagination so we can even imagine all these things are possible.
And I guess when you are in a place where things are optimal in that way, you have a lot of capacity to potentially go out there and help the world. And as you talked about, world regeneration. Let's go there for a second. What are you doing in that regard? And where's the juice coming for that from?
Yeah, well, I mean, as one world is dying, another is being born. You know, we're in a monumentally transitionary state on this planet. You know, look around. It's both terrifying and unbelievably exciting. And I think that one of the best things that we can do is to transmute our own fear, our own dramatic worldview of thinking everything's falling apart, and actually start to get a little more rooted in an accurate worldview. And one of the best ways that I would recommend doing that is read a book called Factfulness, 10 Reasons Why the World's Not as Bad as You Think It Is. Something like that.
Yeah, I think
phenomenal
we'll put that in
book.
The show notes.
Phenomenal book.
Yeah.
And it doesn't deny that there aren't very serious problems, but it also illuminates how much is good right now. And I really don't think we can actually effectively solve the problems that we are facing collectively without being clear that everything isn't going wrong. That directionally, there's a lot of really good news right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can be in the world where you're actually being from a place of fear, or be in a place where you're actually looking at everything as it is, and there are good things.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'd rather choose that reality because I can actually make more of an impact.
And it's not just fantasy.
It's not just fantasy.
Like you said, it's actually seeing what is rather than only seeing the disaster. Yeah. And so I think that's a for me,
focusing on the D's.
I don't trust anybody that can't hold the good with the bad.
Right.
I'm like, oh, you're only able to look at the bad on the planet right now? Don't trust you. I'm like, cool. Like, I know you think what you're saying is really important, but I need people who have the larger perspective. That's who I'm going to be interested in listening to. To that end, then I think that building community is a really important piece of this time right now. Being connected to the people who are holding this ideal for a better world, who are living it, who are embodying it, who are operating from a frequency that isn't just fear, isn't just the shadow states of human consciousness, but that is actually coming from this more open-hearted space of possibility and recognition of both the good and the bad, but aren't perpetuating it from their own way of being. There's how do we create large-scale societal shifts? That's part of what I'm trying to do with my company is can we transform business culture at large from one of command and control and motivation by fear to one of a service-based model where you flip the org chart, where the executives are working for the employees, where the servant becomes the served, and actually have high levels of trust, high levels of connection, which I think start to shift human consciousness. I think it really does create transformation in the people. Whatever culture we're a part of penetrates us at many, many levels and influences the rest of our lives. So if we can start to shift the world of work in a very positive direction from 70% disengaged right now is what Gallup says.
Oh, wow.
To 70% engaged.
Yeah.
People actually able to start to discover some of their purpose inside of companies, to cultivate esteem, create a sense of belonging. I think that can have a very large scale impact. There's, and it's like we can't solve, I'd love to create, energy companies at some point. I'd love to create a, psychedelic healing spa at some point where you start to actually go in and start healing trauma and helping people clear out the gunk out of their system so they can actually live a clearer life. All of those things are really fun projects. And right now I'm really focused on what's in front of me. And then also, building it in my own life, and trying to, for the most part, do what I still think are symbolic acts of sustainability and restoration, of, curbing carbon emissions and sourcing local food. And, I just installed solar on the house and that's cool. And I can drive on sunshine and, that's pretty freaking cool. And I think that they're, for the most part, still symbolic gestures, and that if we're going to make it through this century largely intact, there needs to be such large scale changes. And if we don't, I still think that the system is going to correct itself, and maybe there's large population fluctuations, but a new world is actively being incubated right now.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of these changes they start at a personal level. And it sounds like what you're talking about is with these ideas of potentially helping the individuals clear out their gunk is to, seed that change.
Yeah, our external world is a reflection of our internal world. The world we see outside of ourselves is a projection of our own internal reality. And that's a whole other nuanced conversation. Of course, it's not as simple as that, and yet it is.
Right. Yeah, it's just occurred to me that a lot of things we've been talking about, there's so many nuances in there. If we wanted, we could probably go in there for a while. But there's one thing I do want to touch on is we were talking about briefly before we started recording about responsibility and how that plays a role. Do you see yourself?
What a pain in the ass responsibility is.
Yeah, let's go there. So I'm so curious. I say responsibility, your face lights up. What's up with that?
Yeah, what is up with that? Yeah. Who am I? It is interesting. I think that part of why it lights up is that that learning to not fear responsibility, learning to embrace responsibility of our lives, of taking on the responsibility for our family, our homes, our companies, our world, makes us stronger. Now, we want to make sure that we're not already compromised, because, it's one thing to go to the gym and do some squat presses. And that's kind of taking on responsibility. You're putting weight on your shoulders and you're lifting it. But if you're compromised, meaning that your posture isn't right and your legs bowed out in the incorrect way, that responsibility will hurt you.
Yeah.
And so finding proper alignment, and you could say proper alignment to our purpose, to our lives, to the way we're wired, and then stacking that responsibility on our shoulders, that's how it's actually going to make us stronger. And so not shying away from, we were talking a little bit earlier of like the festy kid that's just like, screw all responsibility and I'm going to go vagabond and live a life completely free of responsibility. And albeit there are things that makes possible that are impossible with more of the tethered life.
Right.
And again, like, so much of this is internal too. So going on the road and traveling without a care of the world doesn't mean you're actually letting go of all responsibility. Maybe it does, but maybe you're actually taking on even a deeper responsibility, and you're actually learning to take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, you're taking care of yourself in a way that maybe it doesn't follow a certain, preconceived set of, whatever templates there are for, this is how you do it.
Absolutely.
You're taking care of yourself.
And then maybe when that cycle is complete, then you're like, all right, I'm going to take on a mortgage and a relationship. And because I didn't compromise my heart's desires, because I didn't just go along with the crowd and get the job when I was supposed to, when society told me I would, then I'm not living this life that feels like a lie, because I know there was another path I could have taken and it would have produced a different result. And oh God, did I make a giant mistake?
Right.
And so it's impossible to say what that is for anyone in person. We can't make judgments about somebody else because we don't we don't know their path.
Exactly.
We don't know that even the things that look like horrible decisions could be the gold that's going to produce an incredible life for them.
And at the same time, if someone's listening to this and they're feeling beat up, they're feeling like nothing's going right, sounds like go take care of yourself. That's being responsible. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, it starts with you. If you're getting your ass kicked by life, go deeper into what's going on here. Where's this shit coming from?
Yeah.
How can you do the deeper inner work? How can you dive into those shadows and start, actually working with them rather than just being a victim of them, thinking you're a victim of them, thinking you're a victim of the world, and actually start thinking, okay, well, what is this actually teaching me? What is the lesson here?
And perhaps even more fundamental than that would be looking at whether you're assuming you deserve this bad luck in life. Because a lot of times, people just have this, I've had this, like, I think I deserve nothing better. This is, okay, if it's hard and it's suffering, okay, this is what I deserve. This is what I'm worth. So any of those other things, self-care and questioning and inquiry, that doesn't even occur to me because I know I don't deserve that.
And that's where having good friends come in. That's where doing work that is going to have you challenge your own beliefs and assumptions is so critical.
Having the community.
Yeah, having community.
Yeah.
And and that can be hard when you don't know where community is. When when you aren't invited to the party, it's hard to know that the party's happening.
Right. or you just knew about it, never got invited.
Right.
That would
totally.
suck.
Yeah, that's the worst. I'd way rather not know about the party and not be invited. But it's you gotta just search and you'll find, right? Like we've never had a more accessible to every piece of wisdom and knowledge and course and transformational opportunity than we do now.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's kind of like Google that shit.
Yeah.
Like go, I said life book, go freaking take the life book, go do Landmark, go, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
There's thousands of other opportunities.
Yeah.
But you have to have the motivation. You have to have the willingness to step outside of the limited worldview that's led you to where you are now.
Because you deserve it. You deserve to actually have that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I thought you were saying you deserve it because you deserve to have your life kicked by ass.
Oh, no.
Jazzwall, you're such a sadist.
Yeah, it's just a seasonal thing.
Yeah.
No, you deserve to go out there and find out for yourself, and you deserve a better life. You deserve to be
You only
happy.
deserve it if you think you do.
Exactly.
And that's the weird thing.
And it comes down to it's a funny
Because
one.
I don't think that anybody deserves anything. It's not like we're born as, the whole idea of human beings have the right to pursue happiness and liberty. I'm like, that's a cool idea, but it's just an idea.
Right.
It's not some shit we made up. It's a fiction.
Yeah. I was more referring to going out there and taking a course or going out there and doing things to improve your life. If someone's asking, why should I do this? Because at a very fundamental level, I'm not going to do it for some reason. I'm like, well, maybe because you deserve to actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's there for you,
Yeah.
Make a choice.
Yeah. And it is that choice.
Yeah.
Like
It's that choice.
life presents a continual series of choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
So may we choose well.
May we choose well. Yeah. Well, Shane, it's been about hour and 30 minutes, and thank you so much for amazing words of wisdom and sharing. And I feel like we just skimmed the surface right now, and perhaps we could do another one of these at some point in the near future.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun threads we could
Totally.
we could pull on a little further.
Any parting words for whoever's listening?
It's going to be a wild decade. We think that a lot of change happened in the last 10 years. Buckle your seatbelt. Build your community. Deepen your friendships. Tell the people you love that you love them. Lean into the wildness of this life, and let's make it an incredible decade. Let's make it one where we're paying attention to the goodness of the world and not just what's wrong. And let us nourish that with our attention. Let us nourish our loved ones, our relationships. Let us be that beacon of light in the world.
Oh my God. We could do another episode on the wild decade that's about to come. 2020.
2020s.
Oh my God. Happy New Year, man.
Likewise, Happy New Year.
All right, people. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.